Have you ever felt a connection so intense that it convinced you this had to be love, only to realize later that something was missing? That powerful pull, the rush in your chest, the way one person suddenly dominates your thoughts, it feels undeniable, it feels rare, it feels important, and because it feels so strong, you assume it must mean something deep and lasting. Most people do. That is why this message matters. Because what feels like love at the beginning often isn't love at all, and confusing the two quietly destroys relationships every single day. From the moment you feel that spark, your mind starts racing ahead of reality. You imagine the future before you understand the present. You excuse behaviors you would never accept otherwise. You silence your instincts because the chemistry feels too good to question. This is not weakness, it is human psychology. Your brain is responding to stimulation, novelty, and desire. It floods your system with chemicals designed to make you attach quickly, not wisely. In that state, clarity disappears, logic goes quiet, and emotion takes control. This is where the illusion begins. Physical attraction creates intensity, not intimacy. It creates urgency, not understanding. It feels loud and consuming, which tricks you into believing it is deep. But depth is calm. Depth is steady. Depth doesn't rush you into decisions that cost you peace later. When attraction leads, you don't ask the right questions. You don't look closely at values, emotional maturity, or how conflict is handled. You focus on how they make you feel in the moment, not how they will treat you over time. Think about how often attraction has convinced you to stay when you should have walked away. How many red flags did you minimize because the connection felt special? How many times did you tell yourself things would change once the excitement settled? Attraction is persuasive. It speaks in emotion, not truth. And when relationships are built on that foundation alone, they collapse the moment reality shows up. Here is the truth most people never hear early enough. Love is not the rush. Love is what remains when the rush fades. Love is how safe you feel being honest. Love is how problems are handled, not how sparks feel. Love grows slowly, while attraction hits fast. And because fast feels powerful, people choose it again and again, even when it has already hurt them before. If you stay with this message, you will begin to see your past differently, not with shame, but with understanding. You will learn why certain patterns keep repeating, why the same disappointments show up in different faces. More importantly, you will discover how to stop choosing connections that burn bright and die quickly, and start recognizing the kind of bond that actually lasts. What you are about to hear can change the way you choose love forever, but only if you are willing to question what you thought love was in the first place. What you felt wasn't random, and it wasn't magic either. It was chemistry doing exactly what it was designed to do. Your brain is wired to respond to physical attraction before it ever considers long-term truth. When someone triggers desire, novelty, or validation, your mind releases dopamine, the same chemical linked to addiction and reward. It sharpens focus, it creates craving, it pushes you to seek more, faster, now. In that state, your brain is not asking whether this person is good for you. It is only asking how to keep the feeling alive. This is why attraction feels urgent. It creates a sense of importance that isn't earned yet. You start attaching meaning before evidence. You project qualities onto someone that you haven't actually experienced. Your mind fills in the blanks with hope instead of observation. This isn't romance, it's prediction. And the brain is very convincing when it wants you to believe something that feels good. Psychology shows that when attraction is strong, your ability to evaluate risk drops. You overlook inconsistency. You explain away disrespect. You delay boundaries, not because you are unaware, but because awareness threatens the feeling you don't want to lose. Attraction narrows your attention. It zooms in on potential and blocks out patterns. That is why red flags don't feel red at first. They feel irrelevant, or temporary, or misunderstood. Your nervous system plays a role here too. When attraction mixes with uncertainty, it creates emotional intensity. The unpredictability keeps you alert. You mistake that alertness for passion. But what your body is actually experiencing is stress paired with desire. That combination can feel intoxicating. It makes highs higher and lows lower. It keeps you emotionally hooked, even when you are not emotionally safe. This is where many people confuse attachment with love. Attachment says, I need this feeling to stay okay. Love says, I choose this person even when feelings fluctuate. Attachment is driven by fear of loss. Love is grounded in security. When attraction is the foundation, fear quietly enters the relationship early. Fear of being replaced, fear of losing interest, fear of not being enough. That fear shapes behavior. It creates anxiety, control, and emotional imbalance. You may notice how quickly attraction-based connections move. Fast bonding, fast promises, fast intensity. Speed creates closeness without trust. It skips the work required to build something real. And when reality eventually slows things down, confusion sets in. People start asking what went wrong when nothing actually went wrong. The chemistry simply stopped doing the heavy lifting. It was never meant to sustain. Understanding this changes everything. It removes the mystery. It takes the blame off your character and places it on biology. You weren't foolish, you were human, but awareness gives you power. Once you recognize how attraction influences your choices, you stop letting it drive blindly. You begin to pause instead of rush. You observe instead of assume. You start asking different questions, not about how strong the spark is, but about how stable the connection feels. This awareness is not meant to kill attraction. It is meant to put it in its proper place. Attraction can open the door, but it cannot build the house. If you let it lead, it will take you in circles. If you understand it, you can finally choose differently. And that choice is the first step toward a relationship that doesn't just excite you, but supports you, respects you, and lasts. At some point, the intensity softens, the messages slow down, the rush quiets. And in that space, something important is revealed. This is the moment most people misunderstand. They think something is wrong. They think love is leaving. But what is actually happening is exposure. Reality is stepping forward, asking to be seen without the filter of excitement. Attraction was loud enough to carry everything before. Now it steps back, and the relationship has to stand on its own. This is Here, truth becomes unavoidable. You begin to notice how problems are handled. You notice whether conversations feel safe or tense. You feel the difference between being accepted and being tolerated. The absence of constant excitement doesn't create the problem. It reveals what was always there. Compatibility doesn't suddenly disappear. It either exists or it doesn't. Attraction simply delayed that realization. Many people panic at this stage. They chase the early feeling instead of building something deeper. They try to recreate the spark through drama, distance, or emotional games. They confuse peace with boredom because their nervous system became addicted to stimulation. Calm feels unfamiliar, stability feels empty, but calm is where real connection lives. Calm is where trust grows. Calm is where you can finally be yourself without performing. Love does not announce itself with fireworks every day. Love shows up quietly, consistently. It listens when things are uncomfortable. It stays present when feelings dip. Love is built through shared effort, not shared intensity. And this is why attraction alone cannot carry a relationship forward. Attraction doesn't teach you how to resolve conflict. It doesn't teach you how to grow together. It doesn't teach you how to choose each other on ordinary days. When attraction fades, people often ask whether they chose wrong. The deeper question is whether they chose consciously at all. Did you choose based on alignment or impulse? Did you observe behavior over time or rely on how someone made you feel early on? These questions are uncomfortable, but they are necessary, because love is not something you fall into and hope survives. Love is something you build with awareness and intention. This stage demands emotional maturity. It asks you to slow down, to stop outsourcing your decisions to chemistry. It asks you to develop skills attraction never required: patience, communication, empathy, and self-regulation. Without these, even the strongest initial connection will collapse under pressure. Life is not a constant high. It is routine, stress, responsibility, and change. Attraction can't carry you through those seasons. Love can. Here is the shift that changes everything. Instead of asking whether the feeling is still there, ask whether respect is still present. Ask whether you feel emotionally safe. Ask whether growth is encouraged or threatened. These answers tell you far more than chemistry ever could. Love doesn't disappear when attraction fades. It either begins, or it reveals that it was never there. This realization is not meant to discourage you, it is meant to free you. Free you from chasing sparks that burn out. Free you from blaming yourself when intensity doesn't last. Free you to choose relationships that grow stronger with time, not weaker. When you stop expecting attraction to do the work of love, you finally give yourself the chance to experience a connection that doesn't just start strong, but stays strong. When attraction is the main reason you choose someone, it doesn't just affect how a relationship begins, it shapes how long you stay, even when staying hurts. This is the cost few people talk about. Attraction can keep you loyal to potential instead of reality. It convinces you to invest more time, more energy, more hope into situations that consistently drain you. You don't leave because the connection still feels powerful. And as long as that feeling exists, you tell yourself the pain must be worth it. This is how people remain stuck in cycles that damage their self-worth. They tolerate behavior they would advise others to walk away from. They negotiate their boundaries down to almost nothing. They wait for moments of closeness to compensate for long periods of confusion. Attraction becomes the excuse for endurance, and endurance slowly turns into emotional exhaustion. Psychologically, this happens because the brain values intermittent reward more than consistent safety. When affection comes and goes, it creates stronger attachment. Your mind keeps chasing the high, believing that if you try harder, communicate better, or change yourself enough, the early feeling will return permanently. But what you are chasing is not love. You are chasing relief from uncertainty. Over time, this dynamic erodes your sense of self. You become hyper-aware of their moods. You measure your worth by their attention. You lose clarity because your emotional state depends on whether the attraction is being fed or withheld. This is not connection. This is dependency. And dependency feels intense, but it costs you peace. Another hidden cost is how attraction-based choices shape your future expectations. After repeated disappointment, you may begin to believe that relationships are supposed to hurt, that love always feels unstable, that calm equals boredom and excitement equals meaning. This belief quietly lowers your standards. You stop seeking emotional safety because you no longer recognize it as essential. You start associating love with anxiety, and that association follows you into every new connection. This is not because you attract the wrong people. It is because attraction alone keeps selecting familiar emotional patterns. Chemistry often feels strongest with what is unresolved inside you. It pulls you toward dynamics you already know, even if they hurt. Without awareness, you confuse familiarity with compatibility. And that confusion repeats until it is confronted. The most painful part is that many people blame themselves for these outcomes. They assume they failed. They assume they are difficult to love. They assume something is missing in them. But the truth is simpler and kinder. They were never taught how to choose beyond attraction. They were taught to chase sparks, not stability. And when sparks fade, they were taught to doubt themselves instead of the foundation. Recognizing this is not about regret, it is about reclaiming power. When you see the pattern clearly, you stop personalizing the pain. You stop romanticizing struggle. You begin to understand that love should not feel like constant effort to be chosen. Love should not require you to abandon yourself to be kept. This awareness creates a turning point. It allows you to separate desire from decision. It gives you permission to walk away from connections that excite you but diminish you. It helps you honor your emotional needs instead of overriding them for intensity. And slowly, something shifts. You stop chasing what feels urgent and start valuing what feels secure. The cost of choosing only attraction is not just heartbreak, it is time, energy, and self-trust. But once you understand this, you don't repeat it unconsciously. You begin to choose with clarity, and that clarity protects you from mistaking intensity for intimacy ever again. When attraction no longer leads your choices, something quieter begins to matter. You start noticing how someone treats you when there is nothing to gain. You feel the difference between being desired and being respected. Real love does not spike your anxiety. It settles your nervous system. It doesn't keep you guessing where you stand. It makes you feel grounded, not obsessed. Love is not the absence of conflict. It is the presence of care during conflict. It is how disagreements are handled without humiliation or withdrawal. It is the ability to stay emotionally available even when things feel uncomfortable. Audible. Attraction avoids discomfort. Love moves through it. Love does not disappear when moods change or stress rises. It adapts, it remains. In a healthy connection, you don't feel the need to earn basic kindness. You don't perform to be chosen again. You don't shrink to maintain closeness. Love creates space for your full self, your opinions, your boundaries, your growth. It doesn't punish you for having needs. It doesn't threaten you with distance when you ask for clarity. Psychologically, love creates safety before excitement. That safety allows your mind to relax. You are not constantly scanning for signs of rejection. You are not hyper-focused on maintaining interest. Your energy is freed to build, to contribute, to grow. This is why love feels steady. Not because it lacks passion, but because it is not fueled by fear. Love is consistent behavior over time. It is reliability without being asked. It is effort that doesn't disappear after the early phase. Attraction shows up loudly and leaves quietly. Love shows up quietly and stays. It is expressed in small choices made daily, not dramatic gestures made occasionally. Many people overlook love because it does not overwhelm them at first. It doesn't hijack their emotions. It doesn't demand immediate attachment. It invites gradual trust. And for those conditioned to intensity, gradual trust can feel unfamiliar. But unfamiliar does not mean wrong. Often, it means healthy. Love supports your growth even when it challenges the relationship. It does not feel threatened by your independence. It does not compete with your purpose. Instead of pulling you into emotional chaos, it pushes you toward clarity. It makes you stronger, not smaller, more confident, not more anxious. This kind of love requires discernment. It requires patience. It asks you to slow down long enough to see someone clearly. Attraction wants immediacy. Love wants understanding. Attraction asks how they make you feel. Love asks how you become together. Attraction focuses on chemistry. Love focuses on character. When you experience real love, you don't have to convince yourself to stay. You don't rely on hope to survive. You don't confuse intensity with meaning. You feel chosen without chasing. You feel valued without performing. You feel seen without shouting. Choosing love over attraction does not mean ignoring desire. It means letting desire be informed by wisdom. It means allowing attraction to exist without letting it decide. It means recognizing that what lasts is built, not found in a moment. Once you understand this, your standards change naturally. You stop being impressed by charm alone. You stop mistaking attention for care. You stop equating emotional highs with connection. And in that shift, something powerful happens. You become available for a relationship that does not consume you, but completes you in a grounded, steady way. This is the love that endures, not because it feels intense every day, but because it is strong enough to remain when intensity fades. Most relationships collapse not because love disappears, but because people never learn how to move beyond attraction. When the early intensity fades, many couples are unprepared for what replaces it. They expected feelings to carry them. They expected effort to feel effortless. And when reality demands skills they never developed, confusion turns into frustration. At this stage, expectations become dangerous. People expect the same excitement with none of the uncertainty. They want comfort without vulnerability. They want stability without responsibility. And when those expectations aren't met, disappointment grows quietly. Instead of asking what the relationship needs now, they ask why it doesn't feel like it used to. That question alone slowly weakens the bond. Communication begins to break down here, not because people stop talking, but because they stop listening. Conversations turn defensive. Needs feel like criticism. Silence becomes easier than honesty. Attraction once smoothed over misunderstandings. Without it, unresolved issues surface. And if emotional tools are missing, conflict feels threatening instead of constructive. Ego plays a powerful role at this point. Rather than leaning into growth, many people protect their pride. They avoid accountability. They blame the relationship instead of examining their patterns. It feels safer to believe the connection is wrong than to admit emotional immaturity. Grout. H requires humility. Attraction never demanded that. Fear also becomes louder. Fear of boredom, fear of settling, fear of choosing wrong. These fears are rarely spoken, but they drive behavior. People emotionally withdraw while physically staying. They compare their relationship to fantasies and filtered images online. They assume something better must exist because this no longer feels exciting. And slowly, commitment erodes from the inside. Another reason relationships fail here is avoidance of emotional work. Building love requires patience, regulation, and consistency. It requires staying present during discomfort instead of escaping into distraction. Many people were never taught how to do this. They were taught how to attract, not how to sustain. So when effort becomes necessary, they interpret it as proof the relationship is wrong. Attraction rewards impulse. Love rewards intention. When impulse no longer guides decisions, some feel lost. They mistake the need for effort as loss of connection. But effort is not the enemy of love. Avoidance is. Avoidance of conversations. Avoidance of growth. Avoidance of responsibility for how you show up. This is also where unresolved personal wounds surface. Attachment styles clash. Old fears are triggered. Without awareness, people react instead of respond. They protect themselves instead of connecting. They shut down instead of opening up. And each emotional withdrawal reinforces the belief that love is fading when in truth T was never given the chance to mature. The tragedy is that many relationships end here unnecessarily, not because the connection lacked potential, but because the transition was misunderstood. Love requires a different kind of energy than attraction. It asks for presence, not performance. It asks for effort without applause. It asks for choosing the same person even when the feeling is quieter. When this stage is not understood, people repeat the cycle. They leave, chase a new spark, feel alive again, and eventually arrive at the same moment. The problem was never the person. It was the expectation that attraction alone could sustain love. Understanding this moment is critical, because this is where relationships either deepen or dissolve. This is where awareness becomes the difference between growth and repetition. When you recognize that love demands skills attraction never taught you, you stop running from this stage. You lean into it. And in doing so, you give yourself the chance to build something most people never experience. Everything changes the moment you decide to stop being led by impulse and start being guided by awareness. This is not about becoming colder or less passionate. It is about becoming intentional. It is about realizing that the quality of your relationships is a reflection of the choices you make when emotions are loud and clarity is quiet. When you pause instead of rushing, you reclaim control over your future. The shift begins inside you. It begins when you choose to value peace as much as excitement. When you stop chasing the feeling of being wanted and start prioritizing the experience of being respected. When you recognize that attraction can open your heart, but only discernment can protect it. This is not a loss, it is a gain. You are not giving up romance, you are upgrading it. Awareness teaches you to slow down long enough to observe patterns, how someone responds to boundaries, how they handle frustration, how they show up when things are inconvenient. These moments reveal more than charm ever could. When you stop rushing toward connection, you give truth time to surface, and truth is the foundation of love that lasts. Choosing differently requires courage. It means tolerating the discomfort of not attaching immediately. It means sitting with uncertainty instead of rushing to soothe it with intensity. It means trusting yourself enough to wait for alignment rather than settling for chemistry. This is the work most people avoid, and this is why most people repeat the same heartbreaks. As you grow in awareness, your standards rise naturally, not because you demand perfection, but because you recognize what you no longer need to endure. You stop negotiating your needs. You stop explaining your worth. You stop confusing attention with care. You begin to choose partners who meet you with consistency, not confusion. This shift also changes how you show up. You become more present, more honest, more emotional, lay available. You communicate instead of guessing. You address issues instead of avoiding them. Love becomes a practice, not a performance. And in that practice, something powerful emerges. Trust, stability, mutual growth. The goal was never to eliminate attraction. The goal is to let it support love, not replace it. Attraction adds color. Love adds structure. Together they create something real. But without structure, color fades quickly. When you build on values, respect, and emotional safety, attraction has a place to stay. This understanding frees you from fear. You stop fearing boredom because you understand depth. You stop fearing quiet because you recognize peace. You stop fearing commitment because it no longer feels like a trap, but a choice. Love becomes something you participate in consciously, not something that happens to you accidentally. This is where transformation lives, in the decision to stop repeating what feels familiar and start choosing what feels right, in the willingness to let go of intensity that costs you peace, in the strength to walk away from connections that excite you but cannot sustain you. When you choose love with awareness, you stop hoping relationships will work and start building ones that do. You stop asking whether attraction is strong enough and start asking whether the connection is healthy enough. And that question alone changes everything. This is how you break the cycle. This is how you protect your heart without closing it. This is how you create a relationship that doesn't just start with fire but survives the seasons. When attraction stops leading and love finally takes its place, failure is no longer the ending. It is the lesson that led you here. The moment you embrace awareness over impulse, you begin to see attraction for what it truly is. A doorway, not a destination. You start to recognize that desire alone cannot sustain a relationship, no matter how intense it feels. Chemistry excites, it energizes, it captivates, but it does not nurture. Real connection is built in the quiet moments, in the choices made when no one is watching, in the effort given without reward or applause. This is where the strength of a lasting bond is born. When you learn to prioritize alignment over intensity, your approach to love transforms completely. You stop confusing fascination with fulfillment. You stop measuring worth by the rush of emotion. You stop chasing highs that fade into emptiness. Instead, you measure connection by consistency, by the presence of respect, by the ease with which two people grow together. You learn to distinguish what feels good from what feels right, and that distinction changes everything. Understanding this requires courage because it challenges the way most of us have been conditioned to love. Society glorifies passion. Culture equates drama with intimacy. Media convinces us that the spark is the goal and anything less is failure. But you are learning a different truth. Love that lasts is calm, steady, and intentional. It requires patience, honesty, and self-mastery. It asks you to see people clearly, not through the lens of desire. It asks you to choose consciously, even when desire tempts you to act impulsively. This shift also transforms your perception of your own value. You stop seeking validation in the eyes of others. You stop chasing attention to feel worthy. You understand that your presence, your boundaries, and your self-respect are non-negotiable. Attraction no longer dictates your decisions because you no longer allow temporary feelings to define permanent choices. You begin to protect your heart not through avoidance, but through clarity and intentionality. By embracing this awareness, you start to notice subtler qualities in the people you meet, how they respond under pressure, how they handle conflict, how they respect your needs without being asked. These insights become far more important than surface-level appeal. You understand that compatibility is not about excitement or thrill. It is about alignment in values, communication, and mutual growth. This is where attraction finally finds its purpose, supporting love instead of replacing it. Relationships built on this foundation are not flawless, but they are resilient. They withstand stress, they adapt to change, and they deepen over time. Love becomes less about fleeting emotion and more about intentional partnership. It teaches you how to give and receive care without losing yourself. It teaches you how to navigate challenges without fear, without blame, without drama. It shows you that lasting intimacy is a choice made daily, not a feeling discovered by accident. The power of this understanding is profound because it frees you from patterns that no longer serve you. You stop repeating cycles of intensity followed by disappointment. You stop mistaking temporary excitement for permanent fulfillment. You stop sacrificing peace for passion. You begin to choose relationships that reflect not what you want to feel in the moment, but who you want to become over a lifetime. This is how real transformation occurs. By valuing depth over immediacy, intention over impulse, clarity over illusion, you create the conditions for love that does more than survive. It thrives. Attraction is no longer the leader of your heart. It becomes a companion, enhancing what has been intentionally built, enriching what has been thoughtfully nurtured. And in that space, the relationships you form are no longer defined by temporary sparks. They are defined by enduring strength, mutual respect, and a love that grows quietly, steadily, and powerfully, long after the first excitement fades.